Commander Alan Hayes stood at the viewport of the Earth diplomatic vessel Horizon. He watched the massive structure of New Geneva Station grow larger as they approached. The station was beautiful from a distance, all gleaming metal and graceful curves. But Hayes knew the ugliness that lay beneath its shiny surface. 10 minutes until docking, Commander, said Lieutenant Sam Patterson from behind him. Hayes nodded without turning. Are the documents prepared? Yes, sir. Ambassador Miller has reviewed them one final time. Hayes finally turned away from the viewport. The ship's conference room was filled with the remaining human diplomatic staff, 20 men and women who would soon be the last humans in Council space. Their faces showed a mix of emotions, determination, relief, and a touch of fear. Ambassador. Diane Miller sat at the head of the table. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her face showed the weariness of someone who had fought too long and lost too often. 50 years, she said quietly. 50 years we tried to make this work. Hayes took his seat beside her. And 50 years they treated us like children. Miller nodded. The Council views species by their age, not their abilities. To them, we are babies who should be seen and not heard. The ship shuddered slightly as it docked with the station. Hayes stood up and straightened his uniform. Well, today the babies are walking out. The Council chamber was enormous, with seating for representatives of over 200 species. The ceiling arched hundreds of feet overhead, carved with the histories of the founding races. None of those carvings showed humans. Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 70 years ago, far too recent to be honored in the chamber's design. Most of the seats were empty today. This emergency session had been called with little notice, though every major species had managed to send someone. Hayes noticed how the representatives clustered by age, the elder races near the center, younger species like humans relegated to the outer rings. High Minister Zeth Kra stood at the central podium. He was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin that seemed too tight for his frame. His four eyes blinked in sequence as he surveyed the chamber. Commander Hayes, he said, his translator giving his voice an artificial smoothness. The Council acknowledges Earth's request for this session. Please state your business. Hayes walked to the speaker's position. He placed the data crystal containing Earth's formal message on the podium, but did not activate it yet. High Minister, honored representatives, I come before you today with a message from the United Earth Government. For 70 years, humanity has been a member of this council. For 50 of those years, we have raised concerns about unequal treatment, about systematic discrimination against younger species, about the council's failure to address piracy in the outer systems, and about technology restrictions that are applied unequally. Several of the elder race representatives began muttering to each other. Hayes continued without pausing. For 50 years, we have worked within the system. We have filed formal complaints. We have proposed amendments to the charter. We have requested review panels. And for 50 years we have been ignored, dismissed, or patronized. Now the chamber grew louder. Hayes raised his voice slightly. Humanity will be ignored no longer. I am here today to formally notify the Council that Earth is withdrawing from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in noise. Some representatives shouted questions or objections. Others sat in shocked silence. Zeth Kra's four eyes blinked rapidly as he banged his ceremonial staff for order. Commander Hayes, surely this is an extreme reaction. Whatever grievances Earth may have, they can be addressed through proper channels. Hayes laughed, a short, sharp sound without humor. The same channels that have failed for 50 years? No, High Minister. The decision is final. Hayes activated the data crystal. The formal withdrawal notice appeared on screens throughout the chamber. All human diplomatic personnel will leave Council space within 7 standard days. All Council representatives on Earth must depart within the same period. Earth will honor its existing trade agreements for 90 days to allow for transition, after which all agreements made under Council authority will be considered void. Zeth Kra's skin darkened with emotion. This is foolishness. You cannot survive alone in this galaxy. The trade networks, the defense pacts, the technology sharing. You need the Council. Ambassador Miller, who had remained seated until now, slowly stood and walked to join Hayes. Her voice was calm but carried throughout the silent chamber. "No, High Minister. The Council needs us. Who mediates between the Varaxians and the Tulari? Humans do. Who established contact with the Arcorian Empire after your diplomats failed for 3 centuries? Humans did. Who maintains the neutral trade? Posts that allow species with incompatible biologies to do business? Humans do." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes or eye equivalents of many representatives. "You see us as children because we are young by your standards, but we have brought fresh ideas and energy to a council that was stagnating, and now we are leaving." One of the representatives from a mid-age species stood up. "This will destabilize entire sectors. The humans are right, they provide crucial services that many of us rely on." Zethkra waved the concern away. "The council existed for millennia before humans joined. We will adjust. They will return when they realize they cannot survive alone." Hayes placed a hand on Miller's shoulder, then addressed the chamber one final time. "We offered partnership, you wanted obedient children. Now we leave you to your ancient wisdom and rigid ways. May they serve you well in our absence." He and Miller turned and walked out of the chamber together, followed by the remaining human staff. Behind them, the council erupted into argument. Bacca. On the horizon, Hayes watched through the viewport as New Geneva Station receded into the distance. The ship was now heading toward the jump point that would take them back to human space. Was it worth it? Patterson asked quietly from beside him. 50 years of trying? Hayes considered the question. It showed we were sincere. We truly wanted the partnership to work. No one can say we didn't try. Ambassador Miller joined them at the viewport. "I've been receiving messages non-stop since we left the chamber. 17 species asking for private talks. 5 offering independent trade agreements. 3 warning us of possible council retaliation." "And the Arcorians?" Hayes asked. Miller smiled slightly. "They've confirmed they'll honor our direct treaties, council or no council. They never liked dealing with the others anyway." Patterson's console beeped. "Commander, we're getting strange reports from the outer systems. Increased pirate activity, near Proxima trade routes, a border dispute in the Cygnus sector." Hayes and Miller exchanged glances. "It's starting already," she said. "They never understood what we really provided," Hayes replied. "They thought we needed their protection. They never realized we were the ones keeping parts of their council from falling apart." The stars streaked as the horizon entered the jump point. As human ships throughout council space headed home, the galaxy they left behind had already begun to unravel. 6 months had passed since humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council. Earth Central Command buzzed with activity as Admiral Kate Johnson studied the holographic display showing human space and the surrounding systems. The blue glow highlighted her stern features as she tracked the movements of ships along the borders. "Another refugee ship just arrived at Alpha Centauri checkpoint," said General Rick Coleman as he entered the command center. The head of Earth's military intelligence looked tired. Dark circles under his eyes showed he hadn't slept much lately. Admiral Johnson nodded without looking away from the display. "How many this time?" "About 300, mostly Tulari families escaping the fighting in their home system." Johnson finally turned to face Coleman. "The Tulari and Varaxian conflict is getting worse then?" Coleman handed her a data pad. "Much worse. What started as a trade dispute has turned into open warfare. 3 Varaxian colonies have been attacked in the past week." "And the council?" Coleman's laugh was bitter. "They've sent strongly worded messages to both sides. No peacekeeping forces, no mediation teams." Johnson wasn't surprised. "Because we were the ones who usually handled that kind of thing." "Exactly. Neither the Tulari nor the Varaxians trust the elder races to be fair. They used to ask for human mediators." A communication officer called out from across the room. "Admiral, we have an incoming transmission from Trader Grant. Priority channel." Johnson straightened. "Put her through." The main screen lit up to show the face of Olivia Grant. Her usual cheerful expression was replaced with concern. She was in the pilot seat of her merchant ship, and Johnson could see stars streaking past in the background as the ship traveled through hyperspace. "Admiral, my fleet just escaped an attack in the Procyon trade route," Grant said without preamble. "Pirates hit us with military-grade weapons. We lost 2 cargo ships before we could jump out." "Casualties?" Johnson asked. 17 dead, 29 injured. But that's not the worst part. Grant leaned closer to the camera. The pirates were using Council security ships, not stolen ones. Actual Council patrol vessels with current identification codes. Coleman and Johnson exchanged alarmed glances. "You're certain?" Coleman asked. Grant nodded. "Positive. Either the Council is attacking neutral merchants or their security forces are going rogue." "Probably both," Johnson said grimly. "Thank you, Olivia. Get your people to safety. We'll increase patrols along the border near Procyon." After the transmission ended, Coleman moved to the intelligence station and pulled up recent reports. "This matches other incidents we've been tracking. Council patrol ships abandoning their routes, security outposts going dark. It's like their entire defense network is falling apart." "Without us to hold it together," Johnson murmured. In his workshop deep within Earth's Armstrong Research Facility, Chief Engineer Frank Martinez stared intently at the device on his workbench. It was about the size of his hand, a complex arrangement of crystals and circuitry that glowed with a soft, blue light. "Run the test again," he said to his assistant. The assistant tapped commands into a nearby console. "Sending test signal, now." Martinez watched as the device pulsed once, twice, 3 times. Then it settled back to its steady glow. A moment later, the console chimed. "Signal received," the assistant reported. "Clean transmission. No degradation." Martinez broke into a wide smile. "Time delay?" 0.3 seconds. Effectively instantaneous. Martinez picked up the device carefully, turning it in his hands. "Do you know what this means? We've just created faster-than-light communication that doesn't rely on the Council relay network." The assistant grinned back, and without their technology restrictions. "We did it in 6 months instead of the 50 years they told us it would take." Martinez set the device down. "Package everything up. We need to get this to Admiral Johnson immediately. Every human ship needs to be retrofitted with this system as soon as possible." As they worked, Martinez thought about how different research was without Council oversight. No more filing requests to use restricted technologies. No more waiting years for approval to test new ideas. The Council had always claimed the restrictions were for safety, but Martinez now understood they were really about control. President Lisa Rodriguez sat at the head of the conference table in the Earth Executive Center. The room's windows showed a stunning view of New Washington's skyline, but no one was admiring the view today. The emergency meeting had been called after receiving troubling news from multiple sources. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," she said, looking at General Coleman. "The Krell Dominion is mobilizing its forces." Coleman nodded gravely. "Our long-range sensors confirm it. Ships leaving their territory for the first time in over a century." "The Krell were one of the founding races of the Council," said Ambassador Miller, who had been called out of her brief retirement. "But they withdrew to their territory long ago after disagreements with the other elder races. And now they're coming out just as the Council is weakening," Rodriguez observed. "That can't be a coincidence." Admiral Johnson pointed to the strategic display on the wall. "They're positioning their fleet here, near the borders of 3 Council systems, all wealthy worlds with valuable resources." "Do we think they're planning an invasion?" Rodriguez asked. "Almost certainly," Coleman replied. "And based on what we know of their technology, the Council worlds in that sector don't stand a chance." Rodriguez leaned back in her chair, thinking. "This isn't our fight. We left the Council. These worlds voted against our proposals for years." "True," Miller agreed. "But millions of innocent people live on those worlds. People who had no say in Council politics." The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Finally, Rodriguez leaned forward. "What are our options if we wanted to help?" Admiral Johnson brought up a new display showing Earth's defensive fleet. "We could send a warning. We have Martinez's new communication system that doesn't rely on Council channels. we could at least give them time to evacuate. Would the Council even believe us? Rodriguez asked. Miller smiled faintly. You know what's interesting? We've received formal requests from the Council asking for human mediation in 3 separate disputes in the past week. They didn't acknowledge their mistake, of course, but they're beginning to realize what they've lost. Rodriguez stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. When she turned back, her decision was made. Send the warning. And prepare a humanitarian mission. If those worlds need to evacuate, they'll need somewhere to go. She paused, then added, The Council didn't listen when we tried to warn them about the cracks in their system, but we won't make the same mistake. We're better than that. As the meeting adjourned, Miller stayed behind with Rodriguez. The galaxy is changing, the ambassador said quietly. Faster than anyone expected. Rodriguez nodded. And whether we wanted it or not, humanity is at the center of that change. Outside human space, the tremors continued to grow, shaking a galactic order that had stood for thousands of years. And this was only the beginning. 1 year had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council. Dr. Paul Wright sat in his office at the Earth Xenological Institute, watching news feeds from across the galaxy. As a xenoanthropologist who had studied interspecies relations for decades, he had predicted much of what was now happening. A knock at his door pulled his attention away from the screens. President Lisa Rodriguez entered, looking more tired than when he had last seen her 3 months ago. Dr. Wright, she said with a small smile, your predictions were disturbingly accurate. Wright gestured to the screens showing various scenes of chaos. Unfortunately, yes. The Council was never as stable as it pretended to be. Humanity was the glue holding many parts together, though they never realized it. Rodriguez took a seat across from him. 3 more species have withdrawn from the Council this week, the Pelians, the Vox Collective, and the Drana Hive. Wright nodded. All mid-level species who were often aligned with human interests. They saw what we did and realized they could survive outside the Council structure too. The Council has split into 3 competing factions now, Rodriguez said. Each claims to be the legitimate government. Classic power struggle, Wright replied. The elder races never had to share real power before. They don't know how. A new alert flashed across one of the screens. Wright leaned forward to read it. The Arcorian Empire has closed its borders to all Council traffic, he said. They're only maintaining routes to human space and independent worlds. Rodriguez wasn't surprised. We were the only ones who bothered to understand their cultural protocols. The Council diplomats were too arrogant to adapt their methods. Wright stood and moved to a large holographic display showing the galaxy. He highlighted different regions in various colors. The recession is spreading through these sectors, he said. With trade routes disrupted and systems hoarding resources, many worlds are facing shortages. Rodriguez studied the map grimly. And these red areas? Active conflicts. Border disputes that would have been mediated by humans in the past. Piracy has increased 400% in the outer systems without Council patrols. Without human patrols, you mean? Rodriguez corrected. We were always assigned to the dangerous routes while the elder races protected their own territories. Wright nodded. Exactly. And now we're seeing the results of their priorities. Captain Eric Nelson stood on the bridge of the Earth rescue vessel Mercy. Through the view screen, he could see the small fleet of ships escorting refugee transports toward the edge of what had once been Council space. Status report, he ordered. His first officer looked up from her console. 17 refugee ships, all maintaining formation. Estimated 20,000 civilians on board. Life support systems stable but strained. Nelson nodded. And our pursuit? 2 vessels, likely former Council security ships. They're maintaining distance, but still following. Nelson had been leading rescue missions for the past 3 months, helping allies trapped in deteriorating Council space. This mission was to evacuate the human-friendly Novan colony that had found itself caught between 2 warring Council factions. Send a warning to the pursuit ships, Nelson said. If they come within weapons range, we will consider it hostile action. As his communications officer transmitted the message, Nelson studied the tactical display. The rescue operation had gone smoothly until they reached the border of the Talaris sector. There they had picked up the tail. "Captain, incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. "It's from one of the pursuit ships." "Put it through," Nelson ordered. The screen showed a thin alien with mottled gray skin. Nelson recognized the species as Trallian, one of the Elder Council races. "Human vessel," the Trallian said. "You are transporting Council citizens without authorization. Return them immediately." Nelson kept his expression neutral. "These people have requested asylum in human space. They are under our protection now." "They are Council subjects," the Trallian insisted. "The Council does not recognize their right to leave." "The Council has no authority here," Nelson replied calmly. "These people are free to go where they wish. If you interfere, we will defend them." The Trallian's skin darkened with anger. "You forget your place, human. You cannot—" Nelson cut the transmission with a gesture. "Maintain course and speed. Power up defensive systems, but do not target unless they make a hostile move." His first officer looked concerned. "Do you think they'll attack?" Nelson smiled grimly. "No, they've been taught that humans are technologically inferior. They don't know how much we've advanced since leaving the Council's restrictions behind." 6 hours later, the refugee fleet crossed safely into human space. The pursuit ships stopped at the border, unwilling to test human defenses. In a secure meeting room deep within Earth Central Command, Admiral Johnson faced a surprising visitor. Council Security Director Morav sat across from her, his reptilian features unreadable. "You're taking a great risk coming here," Johnson said. "The Council would consider this treason." Morav's tongue flicked out briefly, a sign of stress in his species. "The Council as I knew it no longer exists. What remains is not worth my loyalty." Johnson studied him carefully. "Why come to us?" Morav placed a data crystal on the table between them. "Because you deserve to know the truth. Certain Council members deliberately worked to keep humanity marginalized. They feared you." "Feared us?" Johnson was surprised. "We were the youngest member species, and the fastest growing, the most adaptable." Morav gestured to the crystal. "This contains evidence of how they manipulated assignments, technology restrictions, and diplomatic protocols to limit human advancement. They saw your potential and it terrified them." Johnson picked up the crystal, turning it in her fingers. "Why tell us this now?" "Because the galaxy is falling apart," Morav said simply. "And I believe humanity may be the only force capable of putting it back together again. Not as it was. That system was flawed. But something better." Johnson inserted the crystal into a secure reader. As the files appeared on her screen, her expression hardened. "How many others knew about this?" she asked. "Too many," Morav admitted. "But few understood the consequences of their actions. They never imagined humanity would actually leave." Johnson stood and moved to the window overlooking the city below. "We didn't want to leave," she said quietly. "We wanted to be treated as equals, to contribute, to help build something better than what came before." Morav joined her at the window. "Perhaps now you will have that chance. Not as part of the Council, but as the foundation of something new." As they spoke, throughout the galaxy, the unraveling continued. But with it came the first small signs of a different future taking shape. One where humanity's role would be defined not by age or tradition, but by their actions in the face of chaos. 2 years after humanity left the Galactic Council, the galaxy burned. What had started as isolated conflicts had grown into full-scale war between Council factions. Admiral Kate Johnson stood before the massive tactical display in Earth Fleet headquarters, watching as red indicators of battle flashed across dozens of star systems. "The Centauri deep engagement ended 6 hours ago," reported her aide. "All 3 faction fleets suffered heavy casualties." Johnson nodded grimly. "And civilian losses?" "The colony on Centauri 4 was caught in the crossfire. Preliminary estimates suggest 10,000 dead." Johnson closed her eyes briefly. Another tragedy that could have been prevented if the Council had listened years ago. What about our defensive perimeter? She asked. The aide switched the display to show human space. A solid blue line marked the border, with green indicators showing Earth's defense platforms and patrol ships. Holding strong. The Proxima incident last month proved effective as a deterrent. Johnson allowed herself a small smile. 2 months ago, Proxima Colony, humanity's oldest off-Earth settlement, had been attacked by a desperate former Council race seeking resources. The attackers had expected an easy victory against what they thought was inferior human technology. Instead, they had encountered defenses far beyond what the Council had ever permitted humanity to develop. Any word from Ambassador Miller's diplomatic initiative? Johnson asked. The Neutral Zone Accord now has 26 signatories, all former Council members or independent systems. They've established safe passage corridors through some of the worst conflict zones. Johnson nodded approvingly. While she handled the defensive strategy, Ambassador Miller had been building diplomatic bridges with other species who had left the Council or never joined. Together, they were creating pockets of stability in a chaotic galaxy. Admiral, a communications officer called out, "Urgent message from Governor Murphy at Proxima Colony." "Put him through," Johnson ordered. The main screen lit up to show the weathered face of Jack Murphy, administrator of Proxima Colony. He looked concerned but not panicked. "Admiral, our long-range sensors have detected unusual energy signatures at the edge of the Cygnus Void. The pattern matches old records of predecessor technology." Johnson frowned. The predecessors were an ancient species that had vanished millennia ago, leaving behind automated defense systems scattered throughout the galaxy. Most had gone dormant, but some would occasionally activate in response to certain triggers. "Send me the data," Johnson said. "How widespread is this activation?" "We've confirmed 3 sites, but there are reports of similar readings from other sectors, all in areas with heavy conflict." Johnson studied the incoming data. The widespread fighting must be triggering their defense protocols. This could get much worse quickly. As if confirming her fears, new alerts began flashing across the tactical display. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy of ancient weapons platforms powering up, automated defense systems launching attacks on ships from all factions. "The predecessors built their systems to maintain peace," Johnson murmured. To them, these faction wars would look like the very chaos they programmed their systems to prevent. Murphy looked grim. "And now those systems are adding to the chaos. Alert all human ships and our allies," Johnson ordered her staff. "Transmit recognition protocols we developed for predecessor technology, and prepare a briefing for President Rodriguez." This just got even more complicated. In what had once been a luxurious Council diplomatic vessel, Warlord Thex surveyed his growing fleet of ships. The former Council enforcer had seen opportunity in the collapse of central authority. Now he commanded one of the largest pirate armadas in the outer systems. "The human border is heavily defended," his lieutenant was saying. "Their technology has advanced significantly since they left the Council." Thex sneered. "They were children playing at being a spacefaring species. Whatever advancements they've made, they are still primitive compared to the elder races." "The elder races who are now fighting among themselves," the lieutenant pointed out. "While human space remains stable and prosperous." Thex glared at his subordinate. "You sound like you admire them." "I respect a worthy opponent," the lieutenant replied carefully. 3 raiding parties have tested their defenses. None returned. Thex turned back to the star map. "Their outer colonies must have resources we can use. Find a weakness in their patrol patterns." The lieutenant hesitated. "There's one more thing. The humans have established what they call the open ports policy. They're offering safe harbor to neutral ships and refugees. Some of our own people have considered accepting." Thex whirled around, rage distorting his features. "Anyone who defects will be hunted down. We take what we want. We do not beg humans for scraps." As his lieutenant backed away, Thex returned to studying the map. He would find a way through human defenses. He had to. Resources were growing scarce in the regions devastated by the faction wars. His armada needed fuel, food, and supplies to survive. What Thex didn't understand, what the Council had never understood, was that humans didn't just build better weapons when freed from restrictions. They built better systems, better ways of working together. The defensive web protecting human space wasn't just about technology. It was about cooperation, shared information, and mutual support, concepts alien to warlords like Thex. President Rodriguez welcomed Ambassador Miller into the Oval Office of the Earth Executive Center. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, providing a warm contrast to the cold news they were discussing. Another council faction has collapsed, Miller reported. The Traditionalist Alliance has splintered into 4 competing groups, each claiming legitimacy. Rodriguez shook her head. How many factions does that make now? 11 major ones, dozens of minor groups. The original council structure is effectively gone. Rodriguez moved to her desk and activated a holographic display showing a message that had arrived earlier that day. We received this from High Minister Zethkra. Miller raised an eyebrow in surprise. The same Zethkra who said we would come crawling back? The very same, though he's not so high and mighty now. Rodriguez gestured for Miller to read the message. The hologram showed Zethkra, looking much older and worn than he had 2 years ago. His request was simple: a meeting with human representatives to discuss the possibility of alliance. He's desperate, Miller observed. Yes, but he still has influence with some of the elder races. And right now, we need all the stability we can create. Miller considered this. You're going to accept? I'm going to let you accept on our terms. Rodriguez smiled slightly. You were right about them 2 years ago. Let's see if they're finally ready to listen. As they discussed the details of the upcoming meeting, both women understood what was happening. The old order was gone. Something new was taking its place. And humanity, once dismissed as too young and unimportant, now stood at the center of that transformation. The galaxy continued to burn, but through the fire and shadow, the first outlines of a new future were beginning to emerge. 3 years after humanity's departure from the Council, the once mighty galactic government officially dissolved. The final blow came after the Battle of Centauri Deep, where 3 faction fleets destroyed each other so completely that none could claim victory. Commander Alan Hayes stood at the observation deck of the newly constructed Galactic Concord Station. It had been built at a neutral point between major territories, designed with input from dozens of species. Hayes found it fitting that he, who had delivered humanity's resignation to the Council, would now help shape what came next. Quite a view, said a familiar voice behind him. Hayes turned to see Ambassador Diane Miller approaching. 3 years had added more gray to her hair, but her eyes were brighter than they had been in the final days of Council membership. I never expected to be here, Hayes admitted. When we left, I thought we'd focus on building our own future, not helping create one for the whole galaxy. Miller smiled. That was always the mistake the Council made. They thought species would act selfishly given freedom. They never understood that cooperation can come from choice rather than control. Below them, the great meeting hall was being prepared for the first official gathering of the Galactic Concord. Representatives from 76 former Council worlds and 22 independent systems would attend. President Rodriguez's speech is ready, Miller said. The Galactic Restoration Initiative is ambitious. Hayes nodded. The initiative would offer human assistance to rebuild critical infrastructure across former Council space, not as rulers or saviors, but as partners. Is Dr. Wright's new diplomatic framework in the final agreement? Hayes asked. Yes. The psychological and cultural assessment protocols passed with strong support. Miller looked pleased. For the first time, diplomatic structures will account for the fundamental differences between species, instead of forcing everyone into the same template. The station's communication system chimed softly. Commander Hayes, Ambassador Miller, President Rodriguez requests your presence. The Arcorian delegation has arrived early. They shared a knowing look. The Arcorians were notoriously precise about timing. Early for them meant they wished to make a particular point. Let's not keep them waiting, Hayes said. President Lisa, Rodriguez welcomed the towering Arcorian ambassador with practiced ease. Though the insectoid species appeared intimidating to many, she had learned to read their subtle body language over years of direct diplomacy. "Honored Ambassador Vrixa, your presence brings distinction to our gathering," she said in the formal greeting pattern the Arcorians preferred. The ambassador's antennae dipped in acknowledgement. "Your words honor the eternal hive, President Rodriguez. We come bearing news that could not wait for formal proceedings." Rodriguez gestured to a seating arrangement designed specifically for Arcorian physiology. "Please share your news." As Hayes and Miller entered the room, the ambassador continued. "The Krell Dominion fleet has changed course. They are no longer advancing toward the disputed territories." This was unexpected news. The ancient Krell had been positioning for what seemed an inevitable invasion for months. "May I ask what caused this change?" Rodriguez inquired carefully. The Arcorians' compound eyes gleamed. They received our unified message, the one stating that any aggression against member systems of the forming Concord would be met with combined response. Hayes exchanged glances with Miller. The message had been sent only 3 days ago, after the mutual defense clause of the Concord Charter had been provisionally approved. "That's faster than we anticipated," Hayes said. "The Krell are cautious strategists," the ambassador replied. "They test boundaries before committing. Your human expression about poking sleeping bear seems applicable." Rodriguez smiled at the ambassador's use of human idiom, and they found the bear very much awake. "Indeed." The ambassador rose. "The Arcorian Empire values clarity and strength. The old council offered lovely words but fragmented action. This new concord begins with united purpose. We approve." After the ambassador departed to join their delegation, Miller turned to Rodriguez. "If we have the Arcorians fully committed, many others will follow their lead." "And speaking of following," Hayes added, "our sensors show High Minister Zethkra's ship has entered the system." Rodriguez nodded. "Time to welcome our once greatest skeptic." Zethkra had changed dramatically since Hayes had last seen him. The former High Minister looked diminished, his once imperious bearing replaced with a more cautious demeanor. He was, now simply Representative Zethkra, speaking for the remaining council loyalists who wished to join the conquered. "Commander Hayes," he said, his voice lacking its former condescension, "it seems our paths cross at another historic moment." Hayes offered a respectful nod. "History is full of unexpected turns, Representative Zethkra." The former High Minister looked around at the station's design, which seamlessly blended architectural elements from dozens of cultures. "This is not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Hayes asked. "Human dominance. Revenge for the Council's treatment. Instead, I find partnership." Zethkra gestured to the gathering representatives. "Many species here once voted against human initiatives in the Council." Hayes smiled slightly. "We didn't leave to punish the Council, but because we needed to find a better way. That better way includes everyone willing to work as equals." Zethkra was silent for a moment. "The Council was 10,000 years old. We thought its age made it perfect, unquestionable. We forgot that age can bring wisdom, but also rigidity. And youth brings energy and new perspectives," Hayes added. Zethkra nodded slowly. "A lesson learned at great cost." He hesitated, then continued. "I have been authorized to offer a formal apology for dismissing humanity's concerns and contributions during your council membership." Hayes had not expected this. "That is appreciated, Representative." "It is also self-serving," Zethkra admitted with surprising candor. "My people need the stability the Concord offers, but the apology is sincere nonetheless." As they spoke, more delegations arrived. The great hall filled with representatives from worlds that had been enemies under the old system. Now they were cautious allies, drawn together by necessity and the promise of a more balanced future. Later that day, as President Rodriguez delivered the opening address of the Galactic Concord, Dr. Paul Wright stood at the back of the hall. Beside him, Admiral Johnson watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. "Your xenocultural framework is the heart of the new charter," Johnson said to Wright. You predicted this outcome 3 years ago. Wright shook his head. Not exactly this. I knew the Council would fracture without humanity's unique role, but I never predicted we would help build something better from the ruins. Johnson smiled. From chaos, new order. From old failures, new possibilities. And from leaving, Wright added, a reason for others to seek us out. As President Rodriguez concluded her speech to thunderous applause from a dozen different types of appendages, the first chapter of a new galactic history began. Earth stood not as ruler or savior, but as one founding member among many in a system built on mutual respect, rather than age and tradition. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. True stability came not from rigid hierarchies, but from recognizing the value each species brought to the cosmic table. Humanity's greatest contribution had never been technology or resources, but their ability to bridge differences and build connections, qualities the old council had failed to recognize until it was too late.